Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this joint workshop of SPHN and PHRT on the open call for national data streams. We are really pleased to have over 100 participants interested in this new program. Today, I am Thomas Geiger, Managing Director of SPHN, and today we'll tell you a bit more about what national data streams are, what you have to pay attention to when you want to apply for the call, and especially what are the expectations from SPHN and PHRT towards a successful national data stream and a good application. After about 1 hour of presentations, we'll have a short break. Then there will be some pitch presentations by different service providing units that can offer assistance, can offer support or collaboration for interested data stream applicants. And then we'll move on to the answering questions from the Q&A. With us today are presenting Urs Frey. He's the chairperson of the SPHN National Steering Board. Bernd Wollscheid is chair of the executive committee of PHRT. Torsten Schwede, chair of the National Advisory Board, SPHN, and Katrin Crameri, the director of the Personalized Health Informatics Group and the SPHN Data Coordination Center. We're all supported very well by the PHRT and SPHN management offices. So without further ado, I hand over the word to Urs Frey.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to have so many of you here in this call. I would like to introduce a little bit the idea of these national data streams, which are probably the most important initiatives of the second phase of SPHN and I guess also of PHRT. SPHN is an infrastructure development program, and we would like to show you a little bit, how we are planning, the next funding period and particularly these national data streams. So the aim of SPHN really is to promote the development, implementation and validation of coordinated infrastructure to make health data interoperable and shareable for research in Switzerland. But to really be able to use these now developed new infrastructures from phase one, we need big research consortia to use them and make them actually fly. And we do that together with PHRT, and I think this collaboration really helped a lot in coordinating funds, coordinating actually our efforts. And I would like to quickly hand over to the PHRT team represented by Bernd Wollscheid to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Urs. And as you all know, PHRT is one of the three strategic focus area of the ETH domain, right next to data science and advanced manufacturing. And we would like to evaluate and leverage ETH technologies at the interface to clinical questions. And we do see, as Urs will point out in more detail, that ETH and technologies, but also algorithms, are eventually a driving force for national data streams and gaining clinical insights. So I look forward also to your questions today, and thank you for joining this seminar today. Urs.
Next slide, please. Now, in the first funding period, we have actually built up a lot of infrastructures, and we have also learned a lot, that the use of these infrastructures actually has some challenges, has some hurdles, and I guess we have addressed many of these now in the first funding period. And we really hope now that in the next funding period, it will be easier actually to use these infrastructures. And one of the basic infrastructure which we have built is actually the Biomed IT network with the Data Coordination Center. You see here the 5 sites connected to it, connected to hospitals, but also connected to the analytical platforms. And what we really would like, actually, we would like to catalyze nationwide research collaborations between hospitals and universities and ETH and applied sciences, so that with interoperable biomedical data, use of these infrastructures, and that we, with a change in culture towards data sharing, that we really can promote high-end driven data health science in Switzerland. That does not only need technical support and technical collaboration, it also really needs actually a change in culture towards working together and making the best out of our health data. Next slide, please. I would like to give you a few hints, why and how. Sorry, can you go one back? How we actually have come up, or how this idea of the national data streams evolved. We have realized in the first funding period that probably the idea that just putting all the hospital health data in one big data lake of unknown quality was actually not a model that was used by many people. The majority of the projects we had were actually data that came from higher data quality and structured or even semi-structured style. We have realized that the technical interoperability between multi-center sites was not so easy, and we also realized that today's combination of data protection issue and ethical framework within Switzerland really made it very complex for really data sharing and working together in consortia, in multi-center studies here in Switzerland. Now, we have really worked a lot on this, and also in close collaboration with the university hospitals and the universities and ETH, we have now come up with frameworks and with rules and regulation data access committees that are much better to handle in the next funding period and should really support us researchers in a much better way. The idea of the national data streams comes actually from models abroad, but it came also from various driver projects who started to think, we can profit from each other if we really, put together many of our data streams and many of our projects, or if we combine it to existing infrastructures, if we combine it to existing registries or cohorts, that actually can boost the efforts in certain fields. That's how the idea of the national data streams came along. And we would really also like to build up these national data streams in a sense such that these are actually infrastructures that will remain later than 2024 and will be actually platforms for our future young researchers who will then have the possibility to easier embed their future research projects in these existing national data streams, with a common technical framework, with a common data protection framework, and with a common ethical and regulatory framework. How do we picture this? How is the vision of that? Next slide. What we actually want, we would really invite strong consortia of trusted partners who actually already may have worked together in the past, who actually already have existing infrastructures and projects, and who actually have thought about the good governance of data sharing and data use. They should also provide actually a concept of sustainability in a long term of such a platform. And they should actually be able to gather data from different hospitals, data warehouses, omics platform, for example, also patient-related outcome measures, and it's even possible also to have data from ambulatory setting in such national data streams. Next. Now, what we can actually provide, a safe and sustainable, safe biomed IT environment that actually that provides a basis that data can actually be exchanged in these platforms or even analyzed on these platforms. processes like the legal framework, the governance, and the access policy can be standardized or should be standardized on such of these platforms. But for project specific, data need to specifically flow and need to go through the common processes of the university, hospitals, or other data standards. So it should be a framework that actually does adhere to the regulatory framework of the hospitals, of the Swiss law, but should facilitate for the researchers the framework of the national data streams. Next, embedded on this platform, we would like to see one lighthouse research project, which should be large and should be broad, so that in the future nested projects can be embedded. So the lighthouse research project basically is here to show us that the whole platform is really working, that we can use data from this data stream, and nested consortia projects then can actually profit from existing infrastructures and regulatory frameworks. Next slide. It is important that we also have the possibility, that, for example, research results can actually find their way back into the hospitals, for example, with some implementation research or with clinical decision research that can be derived from these national data streams. Next slide. So basically what we would like to have is a consortium of multidisciplinary and national importance. We would like to have an experienced management. We would like to have a clear data governance, and we would like to have a clear scientific management. We would like to have one lighthouse research project and optionally other embedded research project. And we agree that the time is short, and we may not be totally finished in 3 or 4 years, but it probably can only be achieved if already pre-existing infrastructures of some sort or data sets or registries exist at baseline when you start the application. In terms of data, we would like that the NDS should enrich data sets or even existing data sets, for example, registry with clinical routine data, but also very importantly with analytical data for multi-omics data. And typically, we would like here really that you're closely collaborating with PHRT and their possibilities for analytical platforms. It was difficult in the past really to link clinical data with multi-omics or, for example, genomics data, but I think that would be really one of the most important aspects of these platforms. You need to adhere to the FAIR principle, so data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and most of all, reusable. I think these are going to be the challenges also in terms of the regulatory framework. So the initial framework, the initial regulatory framework and ethics need really to make sure that data can be reused that are generated on the platform. And for that, you need a legal and regulatory framework that facilitates actually the work of the researchers. And do think about the possibility of sustainability. It's not about having a research project. It's really about building up a platform for the future for our next generation young researchers. Next slide. So this is basically the general thinking of the national data streams, and you see on the bottom line, you see the primary data sources that can be the hospitals or other healthcare facilities, but some data may also come actually from the university. And the NDS platform specific infrastructures, they can actually help to gather these data in a structured way. The whole process should really basically form the classical biomedical value chain, from a research question, forming a consortia, dealing with the regulatory framework, the clinical samples, the omics samples, data curation, data analysis, research report, publication, and then, for example, for validation, clinical trial, and tech transfer. You may not be able to really do this classical biomedical value chain in the 3 years, but at least take this as a picture, really, how we think that this national data stream should be constructed in the long run. And you see here, the research project should embed in these infrastructures and should actually basically adhere to this whole biomedical value chain. Next slide. So the national data streams are really should consolidate and leverage infrastructures and data sets, and they should build data-enriched research platforms, develop harmonized implementation SPHN standards. They should contribute to health decision-making, and they should create national or international visibility for these two initiatives. And I would like to hand over now to Professor Torsten Schwede, who's the head of the National Advisory Board, and he will actually go into more details in related to these aims. Please, Torsten.
Hello, thank you very much, Urs. I think Urs has nicely summarized all what we wanted to achieve with the national data streams. I'd like to emphasize a few aspects a bit more in detail, which we consider as important success factors when thinking about landing such a national data stream. So if we expect a data stream being an enabling platform to support personalized health research and care, the understanding is that it's sustainable and reusable health data infrastructure development. And when we talk about sustainable and reusable, we should think in terms of technical infrastructure, but we should also think in terms of governance and interoperability. And maybe I give you an example that helps easier to imagine what this could be. If you think back 1.5 years, what we would all have wished for the COVID crisis. I think this is what a national data stream should give us. Access to data in a standardized format, not PDF, not fax, not Excel, but maybe RTF, with well-defined processes, what the data means, where it comes from, who can access it. So in terms of a data stream supporting research from biomedical research, personalized health research to the clinical application. So what we would expect from a national data stream is to support a broad area of applications. And we want to have a lighthouse project demonstrating the value, the impact of this national data stream, but beyond the individual publication. But a national data stream, we would expect also acts as champions and facilitators for fair data in the sense of initiating a cultural change in the way how we collaborate, in the way how we exchange data, in the way how we think beyond an individual research project, but in shaping the landscape for current and future research in Switzerland. So in that sense, a national data stream could be considered something a bit like an NCCR, which also has this aspect of bringing the community in a certain area together and shaping the way how research is done in that specific domain. Now, when you look at the budgets, you'll see there's only a small number of national data streams that will be possible. So it does not make sense to make them too narrow and to apply for many different one-in-one areas, but we would strongly encourage potential applicants to coordinate and find synergies in similar and related fields so that we get a critical mass of data streams that provide sustainable, high quality data for a broad variety of research and not just a very narrow range of applications. So that next slide, please, brings me to the point what national data streams are not. So it's definitely not just one big research project with a closed group of researchers working for 3 years and then the whole thing ends. But the expectation is that it's open to other researchers, that it supports different types of research that might also change over the course of time as more groups get interested. And that also has the potential to support more in the future, even after the end of the project. It's not just an infrastructure cohort or registry project collecting data without formulating a valuable scientific hypothesis from the early begin on, but it's really something that shapes the landscape over the long run. As Urs pointed out, 3 years is very short time. So if we would start now from a completely new idea where there's not yet something to build on, a community of scientists, a community of clinicians, some samples available, then it will be very hard to get something done in 3 years. So we would strongly encourage that communities that already have a certain strengths, that already have a certain coordination, consider themselves as suitable for a national data stream, rather than starting a completely out of the blue idea from scratch. Also, as was mentioned, and as I indicated with the NCCR, it should have a structuring effect on the research landscape. So it should not aim to end in 3 years when SPHN and PHRT ends, but an important factor when the NDS applications get evaluated is the perspective for sustainability. How can we implement processes and change the system in a way that it continues after the 3 years and is not just ending at this end date? Next slide. That also means in terms of applying as an applicant to the project, we would expect that consortia should apply if they can build on a solid basis of already existing infrastructures, either because they already have data or they have already governance frameworks to generate this data. So it has a solid foundation to start, but also leading such a project is a big effort. So we would expect that this project is coordinated by researchers who have a passion for multidisciplinary collaborative research, that are able to bring together a Swiss-wide network, and also that have an understanding that what they are building is the basis for research for a country and not for a project. So we would expect from the beginning on very strong collaboration with the Data Coordination Center to put processes in place that ensure that the project progress can be monitored, the data flow can be monitored. So other researchers that want to use this data and sit on top of it have a very transparent view of what is available, how it can be accessed, and how it can help them to build new research projects in the future. So that also means that if you are thinking of coordinating such an NDS, this will be a lot of work. This will be very complex. So plan for having the time for doing it. It's not a 5% side project. We've seen with leading driver projects in SPHN1 that often applicants underestimated the effort it takes to coordinate such a big project. So it should be experienced researchers applying that have the willingness and the capacity to free some time to do it properly. If you have any doubts if you should or should not apply, then don't hesitate to contact us, and we'll be happy to give advice on what we think are success factors to moving this forward. And I'll hand back to Urs, and we're talking about more the data aspects of the NDS.
Yes, thank you very much. I think at this stage, I really would like to hand it over to Katrin Crameri from the Data Coordination Center. She's also will be the face and contact person for many of these questions then for the data streams later on. Katrin.
Thank you, Torsten. Thank you, Urs. So I would like to give you a little more detailed overview when it comes to data types, also interoperability, data quality, and also about the setting in general that we foresee for these national data streams. So of course, we would like to have clinical data being included in these data streams. So the clinical data from the university hospitals, they must be derived from the clinical data warehouses through the already established pipelines. And the reason why we stipulate this is very simple. We would like to strengthen what has been built already in the first phase of SPHN, the clinical data warehouses. So the clinical data management infrastructures at the university hospitals. We would like to strengthen them in a way that they can also serve future research projects beyond the funding time of SPHN. And this is why we think this is a very important requirement, that the clinical data must go through the clinical data warehouses in case of the university hospitals. Clinical data from non-university hospitals, that could also be part of the data stream, should be collected in a scalable manner. So other non-university hospitals normally do not have clinical data warehouses at the moment, at least. But what we would like to see here is basically that infrastructure investments are being done also with a view to sustainability, so that the non-university hospitals that deliver data or provide data for national data streams basically can step up in infrastructure development and also use these infrastructures that are built in the framework of the NDS for future research projects in a scalable and sustainable manner. In addition to the more phenotypic data that we call the clinical data from the health, let's say healthcare routine data, we would like, and this is a requirement, a mandatory requirement, we would like to have biological data in these data streams. So for example, omics data like genomics or transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics, but also let's say biological data represented in images or multimedia files. So this is the second layer of the data types that we would like to foresee for the NDS. Also, data from existing research or other databases can be included. So curated data or annotated data, for example, also prompts could be a data type that we would like to see included in the NDS, or also data from diagnostic and monitoring tools. Cohort consortia of our big Swiss cohort studies could be engaged in the NDS. Data coming from registries, biobanks, etc. They could also join the NDS as a co-PI or participants. And the NDS data must be embedded in the Biomed IT network. And I show you in the next slide what we mean with this. Next slide, Sarah, please. Thank you. So Biomed IT provides a secure IT environment for the responsible processing of health data. This is what we have built up in the first phase of SPHN. Biomed IT is an integral part of the SPHN initiative. And what we basically have here is an infrastructure, an environment, an IT environment spanning three Biomed IT nodes, one located at SIS at the ETH Zurich, one at the University of Basel, and the other one in Lausanne with Core IT at SIB. And what is basically built up on the top of these of this network of the three nodes is a central layer of services that makes researchers able to use their data, these sensitive health data, in a way that they do not have to take care about the data protection or the security of those networks. They can use these this Biomed IT networks. We have data and even high performance computing services in this network. Researchers from everywhere in Switzerland can remotely access the network. They can work on these data sets in a collaborative fashion. We also have already connected the Biomed IT network to a lot of Swiss data providers. So there is an end-to-end encryption of the data transfers taking place. So this means once a project is established, you know where the data comes from, we hook it up to the network, data flows into the network, and researchers use this Biomed IT infrastructure to carry out their data analysis. The data protection is basically granted by design. So we have organizational and technical security measures in place to guarantee confidentiality, integrity, availability, and resilience of the systems. And this is actually a very important point of the Biomed IT network. It's not only data protection or data security. It's also a very, let's say, heavy argument when we look in terms of how people trust giving away their data for research purposes. Data stays within the Biomed IT network. They're not given out of hands. They do not basically change the owner for every reuse they do. Data stays within the secure network. And we agreed on that data is not allowed to be extracted or exported from this network on an individual patient level in general. So the Biomed IT nodes I already presented to you. SciCore at the University of Basel, Core IT or Sensa is the sensitive part of Core IT at SIB in Lausanne, and Leonard Med as the sensitive part of SIS at ETHZ. And we have the central layer. We have a portal where you can log in. It's all it should be very convenient for users to use this Biomed IT network. Next slide, please, Sarah. So in terms of data interoperability, the national data streams must adhere to the SPHN interoperability framework. So that means we have the semantic pillar 1, where we say we want to have a clear determine the meaning of the data. We have to agree to data standards. We have to agree to a certain exchange format. And of course, it is important that we also take into account other applicable standards that do not come from SPHN, but from our partnering institutions such as SBP, the Swiss Biobanking Platform, or the Swiss Clinical Trial Organization. I'll just put you more information about the data interoperability framework in the chat, where you can find this information in detail. Also, the FAIR criteria, as Torsten and Urs already elaborated, play an important role. We have to arrange for the data reuse from the beginning. So when we start the NDS, it is too late when we think of how should we reuse the data at the end, when a national data stream or a lighthouse project is already completed. We have to think that from scratch. The completeness, the consistency, conformity, accuracy, integrity, timeliness. So this is all quality aspects. We all know data quality is kind of a very perspective thing. So its data is rather fit for purpose than it has a specific quality. But in terms of fit for purpose, this data, of course, that is included into the NDS has to comply with these requirements. And the solid data management plan is also required. So the SNF standards are set here. We are also working on a data management plan template that you can use for SPHN, and we will update you on this in the course of the upcoming months. So to summarize, it's very important that we have a close collaboration with you. So from the DCC, the data coordination side, already in the outline proposal phase, because we can help you, we can give you the framework, we can explain to you things that you do not understand. So please be not shy to contact us. The interoperability of data has to be ensured before any national data stream research project starts. So it's too late when if we think of interoperability when data is already flowing for the project. We should think of interoperability aspects before data is used. And the NDS must proactively contribute to our SPHN interoperability framework. So we are very keen to further develop this interoperability framework with the help of you, of experts of this national data streams. So regarding the data governance, as you might have already seen it in the call, we have these 3 levels. So basically we have the first level use. This is the national data stream, the project itself. So this is long-term, large-scale research project. We exchange between the data providers and the national data stream consortium. But then we also have a second level use. So that is basically, these are nested projects within this data stream, and maybe with a little a different focus than we have for the lighthouse projects that we have at the first level use, but still in the framework of the NDS consortium together with the data providers. And then we have this third level use, which is basically the further use by other research parties. So the further use for project out of the scope of the initial ones. You can either think of an extension of the NDS consortium, but it could also be a totally different third party using this data. The data manager of a national data stream should be a single point for the contact of all data providers, but also for us of the SPHN Management Office and the DCC. The national data streams, they should include a governance board with data provider representatives. And this governance board is not foreseen to basically then also agree on how the data can be used. This is all done with the data providers jointly, but the the governance board is basically the board that also thinks of the templates or the legal agreements when we come to the different levels, first level, second level, and third level use. A clear data management concept regarding the data curation, annotation, which should improve quality at the source, must be handed in with the NDS proposals. So it's not only a data management plan in terms of how the data flows, but also a data management concept regarding how do we get standardization and structuring with the data done at the source. Also, the reuse agreements should always include the data providers. As I said, we cannot think of reuse without going back to the data providers. This is basically how the design or the architecture now foresees this, and we have a lot of good reasons for that. Consent management is one of them, but we also have various other reasons that it always makes sense to have a close collaboration with the data providers where the data initially comes from. And of course, as we already said, the collaboration with the DCC is mandatory. It's important. We do not want to force anything on you here. It's just, it has been our experience in the past. The closer we collaborate, the more we agree or come to a common understanding, the more successful these projects normally are at the end. And I think with this, I give back to Tosna or to Urs. Sustainability is next.
Thank you very much. I will quickly take over here. You know, sustainability is probably the major issue of this funding period. SPHN will end in 2024. We do know from this series that we will have a sustainable IT infrastructure thereafter. So the Biomed IT network and the DCC will actually be further existing in a form. We will make some proposals to this area how that will exist. So you can actually build on these infrastructures. They will remain, but SPHN as a funding structure, for example, to maintain your cohort data or for your research projects, that will end. So you need to have an idea how these projects or how these platforms can exist thereafter, either by new funding instruments, by new other grants that can actually flow into these infrastructures, but most of all, by having a clear concept, you know, about the costs of these infrastructures and data transfer. And I guess this is probably one of the biggest challenges for this funding period. It is also important that you really have a clear idea of the regulatory aspects, and I would like to actually answer one of the questions that has been asked. In Switzerland, we have now a situation that the data protection aspects and the ethics are really complex and maybe even slightly heterogeneous in handling in the different sites. But it's very important that you come up with ethical DQ and MTA framework for these national data streams. That data can be used between the stakeholders, between the centers, and they can be reused. One of the questions that came up is how is it different from the previous driver projects, and that came from Michaela, and clearly you're right. Basically, these are big driver projects, but the biggest difference is really that this time we would like to have a sustainable infrastructure. We would like to have something that goes on after 2024, and new research projects can be embedded in the existing structures. What we also missed very much in the previous driver projects was actually the use of genomics or multi-omics data, which are actually now really an important part of these national data streams to be internationally competitive. Now, data assembly, data curation, these are things we have talked about previously. It is also need that you have a publication policy in your and responsibility in your consortia. And we also would like that research can really work on these platforms. Next slide. Now, how can sustainability be achieved? I mean, there are several ways of doing that. We talked about, you know, that the DCC and Biomed IT is going to be integrated in a future DCC, so that will be taken care of. You have to think about additional institutional funding, and you can also think about, you know, third-party funding that may actually come from research projects that are embedded into these platforms. We are sure, or we are aware that it's difficult to really have a comprehensive sustainability concept, but we would like you to be sensitized to this issue, that this is not a research project that should and platform that should be ended at after 2024. I think make a proposal how you think about these issues. One question that is related to this that came up, I think, from one of the researchers in the consortium, how is it regulated? Is there separate funding actually from the hospitals for data curation, yes or no? We have the collaboration agreements with the university hospital, and we have actually discussed the idea of the national data streams also with the university hospitals, and we have a strong commitments of the university hospitals to collaborate on this. However, on this interface between the hospitals and these national data streams, one needs from the very beginning very clearly define the costs that are actually needed for the data curation of the hospitals. And for the final application, you need to come up with a framework discussed with the hospitals how much cost that will actually create the data you need for your national data stream. So I think the better you are prepared here in defining the interface and the data exchange between the university hospitals and the national data stream, the better off you are later. Next slide. So for the practical matters, I probably hand over again to Torsten.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to briefly ask Bernd Wollscheid if he would like to add something on the general big picture from the PHRT side at this moment, or if you then go into the details.
Yes, sure. Only one quick statement. I mean, we talked mainly about infrastructure, about harmonization of data and getting access to the data, because the science part is actually relatively clear to everyone. So from a PHRT and also SPHN perspective, we would like to fund cutting-edge project, which will be peer reviewed at the interface to clinical questions, on basically conducted on the infrastructure provided by SPHN. And this is similar to other science projects also funded by the SNF or the ERC. We would like to see scientific excellence. Torsten?
Thank you. Yes, then we come to some practical matters for how to apply and requirements. So first, in the call document, we have specified different types of applicants. So as for any grant, we need a main applicant, main responsible person. In this case, most likely two main applicants, one for SPHN funding and one for PHRT funding. So we really want to emphasize this should be a coherent application. Only one document is being submitted with one coherent concept. However, for administrating the funds coming from either SPHN or PHRT, we do need people who are officially responsible for the management of these funds and of the grant. So those will be also the main communication points for SPHN and PHRT, and as I said, responsible for the funding. However, the co-applicants are fully equal in rights, let's say, concerning receiving funding. It's really an equal partnership between the main and co-applicants within the NDS consortium. For SPHN, we have a requirement that the full, let's say, applicants are employed at the SPHN partner institutions. Those are the universities, the hospitals, the university hospitals, and the universities of applied sciences. For PHRT, it's employment at the ETH domain institution. And here we are, those are all at the same level. We would like to reach out and to expand the network, and NDS should definitely make the connections to also other institutions. These can be other hospitals or other research institutions. And this is very well possible in the form of associated applicants. However, we have a limitation for the SPHN funds, a cap of 20% of total SPHN funds that can go to these associated applicants in total. And we'll come more specifically to that on the next slide. But just to keep in mind, with those parts or the bringing in the associated applicants, it's really about building the interfaces, enabling interoperability to the extended network. But it will not be possible to build up from scratch really the basic infrastructure at, let's say, the satellite sites in this respect. And what's also very important is really experienced project management. These NDS projects are large endeavors, are very complex, a lot of different stakeholders and participants involved. So we really have a expectation to have a very solid project management for the entire NDS planning. The same holds true for data management. This is very complex, the data that all will come together for an NDS and to ensure interoperability. So also there, it needs a very, very solid management. The consortium governance that we have alluded to already, of course, you need to be very clear about how will you handle publications together. The ethics approval eventually need to be in place before any research and real data flow can start. Also the frameworks that Urs alluded to with the data providers, but also among the consortium members. And also the consent status for nested projects, so that when you start a new project, a new analysis, that consent is being verified at the source. On the next slide, we now come to more specifically the funding, and here I'm talking about the SPHN part of the funding. So the funds are really intended for, first of all, improving and benchmarking data sharing infrastructures and the interoperability of data. So this is a very, very important aspect. It's one that also needs a lot of time and a lot of resources. We have learned that from the first funding period. What's also a bit different now compared maybe with some of the driver projects is that in the second funding period, we do enable with SPHN funds also more of the scientific output. So data creation, data gathering, data curation, and data analysis are also can be financed in part by SPHN funds, so that what will eventually result in a publication. And importantly, the building these feedback loops to clinical or health decision making to really support personalized health in its broadest sense. That's also part of what SPHN funds can be used for. So from SPHN funds, you can pay personnel that's occupied with data management, data analysis, curation, and then data generation, efforts to modify data capture systems at the source, for example, hospitals, and of course also the entire project management, regulatory management as well. Equipment that's needed, most likely IT equipment, also hardware, software licenses, That's all possible and wanted, not what can be considered as a basic infrastructure that needs to be provided by the host institutions. That applies for most grants, that not, but all the extra equipment that is needed to make the data stream successful is part of it. Infrastructure building costs, and also the costs related to the Lighthouse research project can come from SPHN funds. Consumables include the usage fees of IT resources. From Biomed IT, for example, there's a base package that you can use, but if then there's additional computation or storage needed, that can be under consumables, and then other miscellaneous costs for data analysis or data information and management costs.
Thank you, Tos. So PHRT funding is obviously complementary to the SPHN funding, and also to point this out, I mean, these are legal frameworks mandated to us by the ETH board and the ZERI respectively. So PHRT funding can be, of course, mainly used for the research part of the national data stream, and at least one of the main applicants must be employed by an ETH domain institution. The ETH domain applicant can use funding for clinical services, so for non-ETH domain institutions. And you can please contact the PHRT office about your proposed plan, and we can get back to you if this is feasible or not feasible. PHRT funding covers the ETH domain part of the national data streams, and costs could be provided, or funding can be provided for data acquisition by PHRT or ETH domain platforms, centers, and hubs, for clinical services needed, for instance, for sample acquisition and preparation, or to compile and to make clinical metadata interoperable. That's also what we saw in the initial driver project that's needed. And certainly also costs for generating and analyzing and disseminating research data for mainly PHRT platforms and ETH domain groups and platforms. Tos.
Yes, so think carefully about how you allocate the funding that you're applying for. And what's needed in any case is that you have really you think this through and have a very common and good understanding within your consortium of how you share the responsibilities, the costs, but also the benefits. We have to stick to the funding regulations, of course, of SPHN and PHRT, but I think within those regulations, there is room how you can really optimize the use of your funds. Next slide, please. Yes, a few words about other parties, that whether they can join NDS or how to collaborate. So one aspect is collaboration with industry. Public-private partnerships are possible as long as you adhere to the recommendations that are in the call document. We'll also planning towards the second half of this year now to publish guidelines from the side of SPHN how to interact with industry. However, for regulatory reasons, private partners are not eligible to receive SPHN or PHRT funding. So whether that's industry or also private hospitals, that's not possible. Then concerning international partnerships, so interoperability with international research consortia and adherence to international standards, that's very important. Direct collaboration with international partners is also possible in special cases. For example, if the expertise is not available in Switzerland, also there, SPHN and PHRT funds cannot flow outside of Switzerland, so they would have to have their own funding or be funded in other ways. Anyway, if you're planning to include private partner or international partner, maybe best contact the SPHN or PHRT office, and we can really look at your specific case. Then final practical matters. Everything you need to know should be on the NDS website. The call document is very detailed. We have also application templates with more information in there. For what you cannot find in there, please contact us. We're here to help. Just a few words to remind you, SPHN funding does require matching funds in kind or in cash from the participating institutions. We already said PHRT funding requires participation of ETH domain institution research groups. The outline proposals that need to be handed in are very important now for the reviewers to judge the potential mainly of the proposal to then develop into a full NDS, and shortlisted proposals will receive feedback from SPHN, PHRT and the reviewers that can then be integrated into the full proposal. With this, we come to the timeline. So the call was published in the beginning of June. We are now at the workshop. Deadline for submitting the outline proposals is 22nd of August, so 2 months from now. And we are sorry that this falls into the summer break, but it really wasn't possible to either publish it earlier or postpone the submission deadlines, because as we said, time is very short. We're very ambitious with what we want to achieve from the national data streams. So we all have to really get going here. We're aware of that. August through October, we'll do the assessments, will be feasibility assessment and an international peer review. And then by end of November, we can expect to hear back which proposals were now shortlisted, which outline proposals were shortlisted to prepare and submit full proposals. And it's definitely advisable to use this reviewing time in between August to October to still further develop or let's say discuss your proposals. As I said, end of November, you'll hear if your proposal was shortlisted. Then the next submission deadline for the full proposals is 3 months later, end of February. Selection will be done after review and everything in May, so that by 1st of June 2022, the NDS can get started. And then we have a runtime of 3 years until mid of 2025. So SPHN will officially already have ended, then PHRT2 it's till 2024, but we can extend it into 25. There's even room for a short cost-neutral extension until the end of 25, but that's when SPHN and PHRT must stop the current call.
The next program item is a session of elevator pitches. So we have asked several Vizerektoren, Rektorinnen Forschung to give us names of groups that could be valuable additions to consortia. So it's not only groups, it's also service units. And the goal of this elevator pitch session is for you as a consortium member or potential applicant to make sure that you have all your expertise on board that you need for this NDS to make it a success, or at least to increase the chances considerable. So we have 7 elevator pitches. They will be available later, not these presentations, except for the webinar, but also in a catalog with just names, contact information, and a short abstract of what these groups are doing. The speakers will get 4 minutes each, and they're on the clock. So make sure you stay within the time. I let them introduce themselves, and this is the program. So I would like to give the word to Fernando Perez-Cruz, and yes.
Hello. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Fernando Perez-Cruz, and this is the presentation of the Swiss Data Science Center for this elevator pitch for the NDS program. We are another strategic focus area as PHRT, focus on data science, and one of our goals is to have an impact on personalized health projects, and this is what we are here talking to all of you. Can you move on the next slide, please? So actually SDSC is a team of 70 people right now, working on with industry, with academia, and developing a platform. Within the academic project, we have in 4 years, that's fine, thank you, Sarah. We have funded 51 projects in which we collaborate with researchers all across ETH, Zurich, EPFL, and the Research Institute. We have completed 15 projects, and we're going to start those projects in 2021, and we have evaluated over 200 projects. Can you move on to the next slide? In this work that we've been doing, we have increased the number of publications. We are publishing 20, 30 papers in all kind of domain sites, or from Nature, from things in social science, or even also in machine learning and statistical conference and journal. Right now, we're a team in my team of academic researchers, we are a team of 25 people, where 23 of them have PhDs in things like machine learning, optimization, statistics, and signal processing. Can we move on to the next slide? And basically, as I said, we have 23 PhDs with expertise on all of these things. We have, in the last 4 years, we have a lot of interaction with different PIs. The PIs that want to submit to our call, they engage with us and they talk about the things that the work that they want to do us. And now we are not only seen as a funding agency for our projects, but also a scientific partner, people that you can rely on to do your data analysis, your machine learning, your statistics, or your signal processing on the data. So we approach PHRT to say, look, we want to be part of this NDS. I think we have a lot to offer to the team. We can be doing the machine learning modeling. We can do the statistic analysis. If the data needs signal processing, we can do that. And also we are expertise in optimization. So the thing that we can offer any project that wants to submit is to reach out to me. And then whatever the funding needed for that work, we're going to be able to co-fund 50% of the data scientists working on this project. And if you have any questions, any comments, you know where to find me. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing this. Thank you for everybody.
Thank you very much, Frau Suter.
Starting from working with dead patients to working with living patients as a software engineer and project manager, I moved in the beginning of this year to FHNW to start new medtech projects as a professor, mostly in the area of data-driven predictive systems. I'm from the Institute for Data Science, and we are about 50 employees, and we also closely work together with people from the Institute of Interactive Technologies who will present themselves later. What do we have to offer? Mostly it's about data-driven predictive systems in medtech. It's all about where data science starts, so beginning with preparation of data or data quality review and how well it fits for machine learning, deep learning, or even explainable AI methods. And with that, I think it's also very important what was already shared is how is it possible to have a good data stream which is of high quality and which can be reused and which also can be understood in hindsight what was done. So I was also involved actually I was going to speak a bit about some project on my last slide, but it moved a bit further. I was, for example, involved in some projects where I developed a tool already 2008 about biomedical stress markers. So there it was all about how to automatize digital detection, but also measuring of archaeological samples. or in my position with supercomputing systems, I was part of developing a system for real-time data streaming, such that it was with the University Hospital in Zurich at the neuro-intensive care units, where we built up this system such that they now have a database which is continuously fed and which can be used for research projects or developing new algorithms. But also I was developed in another data processing framework where I was leading the development of a retina image segmentation framework, where it was about automatically detecting different structures in the eyes, but also measuring how do these parts change over time. And with all these projects, we learned a lot on how to take care of data. And maybe now if you would move again to the next slide. So mostly this was a lot about data streaming frameworks, most of the times with images and sensor data. This is where we have a lot of experience, and I also have some experience in the compliance of medical software as medical device. So what does it mean if we develop learning-based applications or algorithms? What does it mean for medical compliance, and how can we stick to that? Typically, we work in third-party funded projects or collaborations or with student projects, and we are always looking for new partners and new interesting interdisciplinary projects. Thank you.
Yes. Great. Yeah, so my name is Dokmanić. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Basel and the director of the university's Center for Data Analytics, or SDSC, which is the reason I'm presenting here. So SDSC is a recently established university-wide entity whose role is to facilitate data-driven research, like I guess the previous two presentations. We offer data science, machine learning, statistics expertise to research groups that, for various reasons, don't have sufficient intrinsic capacities. We also actively work on identifying collaboration opportunities and encourage researchers in all domains to consider the potential of data-driven research. We do this especially in disciplines that are somehow traditionally not familiar with the techniques and the mindset. We were officially launched quite recently, but we've already started many very cool collaborations, and many other are, say, in the late stages of brewing. As an example, I'm listing here a subset that seems somehow relevant for the occasion. We currently work on characterizing the effect of sex differences on clinical trial design and outcome, also retroactively at a large scale. Not everything is related to health, but the techniques should be interesting. So, for example, we apply natural language processing and the deep learning-based sentiment analysis to understand how politicians communicate, or fail to communicate on social media. We apply similar techniques to hopefully enhance communication with people who have a history of cancer in family. We had collaborations that are closer to genomic, bioinformatics, immunophenotype characterization of tumor cell metabolism. Beyond these topics, we're just starting a project on image analysis in microscopy related to the organization of the cell nuclei, and we'll soon engage in another one that has to do with manifold learning in neuroscience. So the reason I'm here is that, well, one of the bottlenecks, as we heard in the first phase of SPHN, was that many consortia did not have strong demonstrable skills in data science. And this is precisely the gap that we're well equipped to fill. So the demand for our services is currently pretty high, but we are very much interested in joint applications for funding. That's something that I like to call a triple win. Of course, it's great for SDSC because it allows us to grow in different ways, to assimilate new expertise. It's also great for the data scientists that are being hired as part of the projects, who would form a bridge between us, the sort of data nerds, and the domain experts. And scientifically, that's a great situation to be in. But most importantly, so that's a win for the consortium and the project, since having a data science partner with a broad portfolio and strong academic credentials results in a stronger, more convincing proposal, and later, hopefully, better science. If that sounds interesting, please reach out to Dr. Fucile, who is the SADA coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dokmanić. All right, Professor Çöltekin.
Hi, everybody. So, Sarah, great you could pronounce my name. It's always a positive surprise. Right, so I would like to also talk about a little bit what we do in my research group. I have joined the Institute of Interactive Technologies at the University of Applied Sciences, Northwestern Switzerland about 2 years ago. If you could already progress the slide, please. I'm a professor of computer science and human-computer interaction and extended reality. And extended reality is the word for virtual, augmented, and mixed reality put together. So there's a lot of research that comes in connection to help from this domain, as well as the human-computer interaction. I also collaborate, or I'm a research affiliate with the Seamless Astronomy team at Harvard. I wanted to mention that because this is a project called Astronomical Medicine. So the key thing was to explore the data analysis needs that may be actually similar between the astronomy researchers and medical researchers. Even though the scale changes, the questions remain the same. Can you press the button again, please? In essence, what I do has a lot of like empirical data collection and analysis. So I do controlled experiments myself. Usually the stimulus is technology, and then we do standard scientific method, so to speak, the hypothesis testing. We use machine learning, AI, and standard statistical analysis. I have strong interest in vision research. I do a lot of eye movement research, and I have done a couple of projects on aging and cognitive health. And that's more from the visual and spatial memory perspective. We can maybe press the next, please. So this is kind of like a big, this is kind of like the big overview of all the projects I've done. I have been at the University of Zurich Faculty of Science for a long time before I moved to FHNW, a couple of SNF projects, and then now I'm doing a couple of InnoSys projects on the FHNW side. The UZH projects have a lot of data analysis in them, but I don't have enough time to elaborate. So next, please, to highlight the health-related projects. So the FHNW projects, they always have either some sort of human-computer interaction or virtual reality or extended reality in them, but some of them are specifically relevant for health research, and one of that is using augmented reality or virtual reality for learning, spatial knowledge acquisition. And we also did, if you can press once more, please. I guess, can you press again? I think I skipped one slide, one more. Yeah, that one I actually wanted to show before the team. So like the 5 projects that we did that touches the health research was, one of them was about querying and visualizing electronic health records. That was an InnoSys funded project, a small one. And another one is about preventing, predicting, and rehabilitation of postoperative cognitive dysfunction, that is after surgeries. Many of you probably know in this audience. We have external industry partners, Altoida and Hirslanden and Clinic. We also have some projects about chatbots, digital humans as virtual assistants or companions to help people follow the procedures or prescriptions given to them. So this is the direction, and then virtual trainers or something about visual health. So just kind of wanted to sample the number of things that we are doing. I'm interested in research collaborations as well as, of course, parts of any kind of data support that we could give. But I think I'm more here maybe as looking for research collaborations or getting to know more medical research teams. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Professor Brodbeck.
Yes, hello. My name is Dominique Brodbeck. I'm from the Institute for Medical Informatics at the School of Life Sciences, also at the Fachhochschule Nordwestschweiz. And the work of our group is based on the observation that while a lot of data is available, that doesn't mean automatically that it's also usable by humans. It may sound trivial, but we are very good at collecting data and writing incredible algorithms. But when it comes to humans having to interpret and make sense of that output, that's less obvious. So our mission is to make data usable through highly interactive, data-rich, and visual applications. I think we need tools that fit the way we think and work. And that's what we do. We design and implement medical decision support systems. The skills we have to do that, they range, of course, from visual analytics, information architecture, but also most of the time, of course, is spent on data wrangling, and not to be forgotten software engineering, because it doesn't help you if you write software, but it's not maintainable and it doesn't work at the end. So we are a team of very experienced visualization specialists with a long history of doing visualization systems, and also software developers. And we build projects in the area of medical informatics. I highlight a few projects. If you could move to the next slide, please. I picked projects that are all connected with university hospitals. So because that's relevant to this topic here. If we start at the top left, that's a collaboration with a university hospital in Bern, with the Inselspital, where we built a visual analytics system to allow them to analyze the patient flows across the hospital campus. The reason behind that is they are currently reconstructing a big part of their central infrastructure, and they need to know how to reorganize the physical space so that it fits the medical processes again, that disintegrated over time. We also do this in Basel. All the university hospitals are currently rebuilding. So we also work with the University Hospital Basel, helping them reconstruct the clinicum too. On the right side, top right, again, that's University Hospital Basel, but now moving more into the clinics, a collaboration with a radiology clinic, where we used heterogeneous time series to look at usage patterns of their large equipment, such as MRIs or CT scanners. So we combined the scanner logs, so the technical device logs, with the energy consumption curves, and trying to get a better feeling for the opportunities to conserve energy, which is also actually an interesting aspect about radiology. But at the same time, we also found that this can be used to look at workflows and processes. And that's now when we move to the bottom left, we combined data from various systems to look at how patients flow through the radiology department in order to get a feeling for when bottlenecks occur, why do they occur, and at what times of the day, and can you predict and do something about it. So we created an animation of a whole year of patients moving through the radiology workflow. And then finally, at the bottom right, is a collaboration with a university hospital in Zurich, the intensive care unit, building on the work that we saw just 2 pitches before from Susanne. That's where we built a user interface to visualize the live data streams of all the beds at the ICU clinic. And that becomes a platform for machine learning algorithms that they developed there, that allow then the personnel, the caregivers, to detect things like ischemia before it happens. And also right now we generate the COVID edition, which helps diagnose and predict the status of patients that come to the intensive care unit in terms of COVID-19. So that's just a little spectrum of what we do. So we build visualization applications, visual analytics systems. And if you ever find yourself having too much data and not enough insights, then you find my name at the bottom of the slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Brodbeck. Okay, next up would be Thomas Lüscher, but he's not yet there. So I ask Patrick Pedrioli to take over, please.
Yes, thank you. And good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick. And in the next couple minutes, I have the pleasure to introduce to you the ETH PHRT Swiss Multi-Omics Center, or PHRT SMOC for short. First of all, why am I talking about multi-omics here in this National Data Streams workshop? Well, at PHRT SMOC, we believe that each person is unique. And of course, right now, most of you will probably be thinking about the genetic material which encodes this diversity, and about mutations in our genes, which can lead to disease. And of course, this is true. But while the genome is the blueprint for this diversity, the proteome and the metabolome are the manifestations of it. And in fact, proteins are the immediate drivers of many diseases. Therefore, our mission statement is to collect and leverage informations across these multiple omics levels in order to assist clinicians better understand disease etiology, gain novel clinical insights, and support their everyday decision-making. During the first 4 years of the PHRT program, 3 PHRT clinical omics centers have been established across Switzerland. These are the PHRT Clinical Genomic Analysis Center in Lausanne, the PHRT Clinical Proteomics Analysis Center in Zurich, and the PHRT Clinical Metabolomics Analysis Center also in Zurich. Although these centers have been operating in tight coordination and provided much sample analysis from the beginning, they were created separately. And today, with the introduction of PHRT SMOC, we want to take the next logical step and group them under a common umbrella, hence providing a single entry point for measuring, integrating, analyzing, and sharing clinical cohorts at the level of DNA, RNA, proteins, metabolites, and lipids. Within PHRT SMOC, we have bench and data scientists that work side by side throughout all stages of a project. Within a center, this means that they will work hand in hand from experimental design till primary data analysis. Across the centers, they collaborate to ensure coordinated and interoperable data generation and integration across the multiple omics levels. And to our collaborators, we offer consultancy, small-scale feasibility studies, support with grant and paper writing, digitization of large clinical cohorts, and safe data storage and exchange. In summary, PHRT SMOC provides one entry point to 3 centers with expertise across the omics value chain. And next slide, please, Sarah. We believe there are many reasons that make a PHRT SMOC a great fit for the national data streams. First of all, omics for clinical research is all we do, and therefore the center has actually been planned from the ground up to meet the specific needs of clinical research. So as an example, for instance, our Clinical Genome Center has recently achieved ISO accreditation in order to provide clinical grade DNA and RNA sequencing. We, of course, provide analysis at scale in order to deal with the large sample cohorts which are required to gain statistical significance in the heterogeneous landscape of clinical research. We operate on a secure foundation and follow the established SPHN Biomed IT best practice guidelines to keep the sensitive clinical data safe, secure, and private. Our omics data and our pipelines are standardized, harmonized, and reusable. In fact, even though we are a PHRT center, we have worked since the beginning with SPHN, the DCC, and Biomed IT to ensure technical alignment across the 2 domains. We are, as a consequence, also an onboarded data provider for the SPHN Biomed IT security infrastructure, which we can use for data lineage tracking, data management, third-party sharing, secondary and tertiary analysis. And last but not least, we are an ETH domain infrastructure and therefore eligible for PHRT funds. There is, of course, a lot more that I didn't have time to tell you about during this short presentation, but if you're curious to learn more, please check us out on smoc.ethset.ch, and do not hesitate to get in touch with us at smoc@ethset.ch. Thank you for your attention and interest, and we hope that we will be able to collaborate with many of you in the future.
Thank you very much, Professor Petrioli, and thank you very much to all the service units and all the research groups that presented today. As I mentioned, the information will be made available to all the participants of the workshop and everybody visiting the NDS website later. We have one little elevator pitch still in the bag, so to speak, which we will invite Professor Lucia as soon as he joins the call. But for now, we will make a little switch towards the Q&A session, and I will share my screen again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. We have realized that we had a number of very complex Q&A questions, and what we are going to do is actually to answer these and put them on the website so that you can all profit from them. I just would like to take one or two very important things ahead, because I guess that may be of very general interest and is very simple to answer. You know, people were asking whether this is the only call of the next funding period of SPHN, and I can actually assure you there will be other calls on driver and implementation projects of smaller scale later in the year. And I guess these are just the very big projects, the national data streams that are the first of these calls. And I would like to also give Bernd quickly the opportunity to inform about other potential calls of this funding period in PHRT.
Thank you, Urs. And in line with what you just said, PHRT will also have additional calls in the context of larger driver projects, but also technology transfer projects, as well as PhD and postdoc projects later this year and then the beginning of next year. So there are ample opportunities to contribute. Thank you.
Before we go to the previously submitted Q&As, I would like to point out also another question that is of general interest. Somebody asked, you know, how can I find, you know, consortial partners? I mean, are there any other type of groups? We have now heard from the elevator pitches that there's quite a lot of really excellent expertise in Switzerland in terms of bioinformatics support, but there are also existing driver projects which you actually can find on the SPHN homepage. And we also have chosen for the NDS a two-step procedure where we would like that you submit a letter of intent type of short proposal, and we will review them. And I guess if we have proposals that may actually fit together, we would inform the people that there may be opportunities for collaboration. Bernd, can you comment on this as well quickly?
You would like to have to comment on what specifically?
You know, you know, where people can find collaborative partners on the PHRT side is also on your homepage. I guess where you can find further.
Yeah, there's of course limited information on the homepage, but please feel free to contact the PHRT office. And of course, I mean, also based on the communication today, I mean, new partners are interested in joining, and we will come up with a list of interested partners, and also facilities and platforms which could be an asset for the national data streams. And this will also published right next to the frequently asked questions section on the SPHN and PHRT website. But please reach out to us, and there's also a common email address for getting information, which is nds@sphn.ch, if I'm correct, Sarah.
Okay. Yes, so I think we have a further 10 minutes to discuss. Maybe we can start with this page of questions which have been submitted. Please help me if I cannot answer all of these questions immediately. One of the questions that came up: can NDS consortia span over one city or one hospital? And the answer is really preferably not. You know, the national character of any NDS will be an evaluation criterion. I mean, we do not request that all the university hospitals in any case have to be involved, but we would like to have the majority of the important national stakeholders to be involved in a certain call. And that may actually, it may be important, you know, to really reach out to people in the same field, in similar fields, to collaborate really on these calls. Our questions are about the structure of clinical data we need in this project for specific patients. I'm not sure that I can answer that so quickly. Is a clinical trial with patients a suitable design for this call? I do not think that we are restrictive in the type of data you use. I think the overall must really adhere to the call, and does cover grant salaries for technical human resources. I think that will all be covered actually in the proposal how they can be done, but in general the answer is yes. Then can SSPH Plus be a main applicant? Main applicant must be the Swiss Higher Education Institution, but other entities can associate it with the main applicant is the answer. And 6, does the grant cover salaries for technical? We had that, yes. Until when can an NDA start? Preferably as soon as possible after the 1st of June 21. Note that SPHNW will be dissolved by the end of 2025. So please contact the MO if a start after 1/7/21 is foreseen. Then point 8, does PHRT allow funding of an applicant's own position in a TT call? I hand over to Bernd.
Yes, in principle, yes, if the faculty is a co-applicant and preferably PHRT only funds part of the position. But this is, of course, always a problem in our current system with senior scientists, that there are not so many funding opportunities. And we discussed this morning. I mean, there's certainly InnoSwiss, former CTI, which funds senior scientists, but we also have only limited opportunities to do this. But please, again, also contact the management office if this is something you would like to discuss, and I'm sure we find solutions here.
Okay. Then the next, where can additional required forms specifying human samples and pathogen use be found? You know, these files are available on SNF, and we actually see, you can actually find them in the NDSL call document with specific links. Can new cohorts be financed by the NDS funding? Unfortunately, SPHN funding cannot be used to fund new cohorts, and I think it would also be quite tough, you know, to build up a new cohort in the time frame. What are measurable outcomes of the sustainability concept? That's an extremely difficult task, as you point out rightly. We can only say at this time, but mainly convincingly explaining the added value, you know, of NDS elements is relevant. So we probably cannot expect from you that you will have a business plan with any you know, potential cost, but we would like you to think about the sustainability and think about how this make proposals, how that can be achieved actually in the long run. 12, do biomed IT and DCC just overtake the already existing data, or would they also help developing a patient's app? I hand over to Katrin.
Patient's app, if that would be part of the project, or is it necessary to have an external mobile app developed as part of the project? So I would say the latter is the case. If we start developing or helping to develop apps for all the different data streams, this is really our core business. I would say if you want to have something developed, it should be done by an external project partner, and also funded through the external through the funding money.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have 5 minutes left. The large number of questions we have received, we will answer in written form, available on the link you find below. We are always open, you know, for help and questions, and you can actually contact us through SPHN, NDS, and we will help you as good as we can. Just remember, this whole initiative is really about, creating a new landscape in Switzerland and not your personal research project to be financed. It's really about changing the landscape and the collaborations in Switzerland.
I would like to also make an additional comment. I mean, we would certainly like to help you to drive these national data streams also into the future. So we are in close contact and in discussions with the ETH board, as well as with the SERI, to establish sustainability beyond 2025. So you should see us as your partner, and we would like to move together into the future there. And so therefore communication is key, as Katrin pointed this out very early in the process, and then we have a very good chance to be successful together.